President Trump taunting his $1 million, I think taunting his $1 trillion infrastructure plan at the Department of Transportation earlier today.
My new vision for American infrastructure will generate $1 trillion in infrastructure investment. We will put new American steel into the spine of our country. American workers will construct gleaming new lanes of commerce across our landscape. They will build these monuments from coast to coast and from city to city.
Steve Forbes is with us. Steve, what do you think? What do you think about that plan?
Well, you can tell he's very enthusiastic about making this happen and getting this thing through. And there's some very good ideas in terms of tapping the private sector or tapping assets of existing public sector projects to finance new projects. For example, here in New York, there's so-called Gateway Project, tunnels under the river, cost $25 billion. One idea is to use the tolls of the Port Authority to back funding for that $25 billion. So the key thing is going to be in the details and the follow-through by the Transportation Department and others to make these a reality, so you get funding not just dependent on local taxes.
Okay, we also have Katie Pavlich with us, I think, from townhall.com. She's a Fox News contributor as well. And there's Katie. All right, Katie. So what do you think of the infrastructure plan? I mean, when he said that he's going to put a new American steel into the spine of the country, what do you think? Were you inspired? Skeptical?
Well, I'm all about being pro-America, so always inspired by that. But one thing that I think is being underplayed here is, yes, we need to talk about the funding for the infrastructure plan. That's going to be a huge part of it, whether it comes from the private sector or from the taxpayer. But one thing that is not being discussed is the regulation part of this. The president has repeatedly, he did it today, talked about these permitting processes taking far too long for people to be able to build these new roads and bridges, and that is why we've seen this delay in things being done. You remember when we saw the Obama stimulus package, which was supposed to go into play and build all these new things. First of all, it was only on a federal level, really, even though some of that money was doled out to the states. And two, there was no regulation reform in terms of getting these projects on the ground and actually started. The shovel-ready aspect of this is actually in Trump's infrastructure plan. It wasn't there with the Obama infrastructure plan.
And he's such a tremendous showman. So he got out there today and he had those huge books that were all the binders and all the rules and all the regulations and how hard it would be to get the permits going. And he was throwing them around and physically and really making the point and asking the question with the permitting process the way it is. And no one knows better than somebody who's tried to build the building. Could we do something like the Golden Gate Bridge? I mean, Steve Forbes, it was a great way to illustrate it when he brought the binders out. But it's true, there are so many wonderful things in this country that would take, like, 10 times as long because of the ridiculous permitting process.
Well, it starts with public awareness of it, and I think there's legislation in Congress to start to streamline this regulatory process. And the federal government still having some money, that is bait to the states. You don't streamline your vetting process, your approval process, you ain't going to get the money. Those states that do it quickly, by golly, there's a bonanza for you. That speaks very loudly, far more than words.
All right. Well, whether it's infrastructure or tax cuts, he's still got to find a way around the obstructionists.
If we had the best plan in the history of the world, we wouldn't get one Democrat vote. Just remember that. If we had a plan that gave you the greatest health care ever in history, you wouldn't get one Democrat vote because they're obstructionists.
But how about this? A reconciliation bill that weaves tax cuts into the new health care changes. That could be on the president's agenda. Steve, this is a brilliant idea, and it's just being hatched now, still in the beginning stages. But they say, look, the Supreme Court opened the door to calling health care some kind of tax because of John Roberts calling the penalty a tax. So since they've done that, take advantage of that and say, okay, with the health care changes, we're going to put tax stuff in there because health care is also about taxes.
Yes, and it's a great way, starting with the Senate, to get two bills done for the price of one, in effect, and not have to worry about being at the end of the year and having nothing to show for it. The Senate apparently is making progress on the health care bill. They're determined to get something done in the next few weeks. If the House can move on taxes, I think they could do it before the August recess. And if they don't, I think you're going to see a move to cancel the August recess and get these two bills combined through so they get the economy moving and they can go home and say, Here we've done something big and positive.
Well, Katie, we have a president who is an entrepreneur. That is a wonderful thing. He thinks out of the box, but the people inside of the Beltway think so in the box. They're so married to the process, you know, to this parliamentary process, which gets stuff stuck. That's what the swamp is. That's sort of the mechanism of the swamp. The president wants to break out of it with this new way of dealing with tax cuts. Will he do it?
Well, here's the thing. While I agree that the swamp causes all kinds of problems, I do think that it's important for Congress to be involved in these big kinds of projects. And I think the country was set up in a way that when legislation actually reached the president's desk, it was supposed to be thoroughly debated and good legislation, not just legislation passed for the sake of passing it.
It doesn't do anybody any good if it goes nowhere. And clearly the Democrats aren't going to help on anything. So this is a way to get around that process.
That is true, yes. But I think we'll see what happens when it comes to combining the two. The Democrats certainly don't have a leg to stand on if they're going to argue that health care has nothing to do with taxes, because they essentially married. Well, they married, and they did it. They married Obamacare to be part of your tax return. So if they want to argue that they're unrelated, that's not going to hold a lot of water.
I think it's a brilliant idea. All right.